Okay, we hope you can hear us. I have been able to establish that the stream is audible, although I'm not entirely convinced about the quality or the consistency of the stream. In any case, we are going to be recording this program now, and we will make it available through our usual social media channels, so that you can listen to it leisurely, even if you're unable to connect with us online and live right now. And as we normally do, it is important that we reflect on our gratitude to the Lord Buddha, thanks to whom we have the Dhamma that we talk today, that we discuss today, and the Dhamma that helps us to swim the sea of samsara, get to the other side and attain Nibbana. Without his Dhamma, without the wisdom with which he attained the fruit of his hard work, of his labor, and with the compassion, without the compassion with which he gave this message to the entire universe, we would be without any solace, without any refuge today. We'll be destitute in samsara, as we have been for many, many, many hundreds and thousands and millions of years. And therefore, before we start this discussion, as we always do, we pay homage to the Lord Buddha and pay our respect to the great teacher, to the perfect one, to the Samma Sambuddharajanan Vahanse. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu. We should also reflect on the fact that there are beings who are unable to be with us in person today, devas, brahmas, and various other celestial beings, beings of fine form, some from the Rupa world, some from the Arupa worlds, and also some from worlds that are less fortunate than we are. They are in those places because of deeds they have done, sins they have committed. But we today, having come across the Lord Buddha's Dhamma, we find the kindness and the compassion in our hearts to invite them, to share with them this pure message, this true teaching of the Lord Buddha that allows us to transcend the journey of samsara. And with that compassion, we reflect on the times that we might have spent with them in our journey in samsara, the times when they might have been of support to us, of help to us, be that with a glass of water or by showing us the direction when we were lost. Not necessarily in samsara, but at least in the worldly sense. So today, when we discuss the Lord Buddha's Dhamma, when we have been fortunate enough to come across his teaching, and we share this message with those who have the good fortune to listen to this Dhamma in person, you and I, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to invite the devas, the brahmas, and those who are less than fortunate, our distant, our past relations, past relatives, to come along in whichever way they can, in whatever form they can, and listen to this Dhamma, so that they may understand the Four Noble Truths, that is, the Dukkha Arya Satya, the Dukkha Samudaya Arya Satya, the Dukkha Nirodha Arya Satya, and the Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada Arya Satya, so that they may use that knowledge, use that wisdom to cross the samsaric journey themselves. So as I invite them, may I ask you to join me to extend that invitation out to the Devas, the Brahmas, and those distant, your past relations, your past relatives, and invite them to come and listen to this Dhamma. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gachantu Devata Sadhammang Munirajansa Sunantu Sagga Mokkadang Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badhanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badhanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badhanta. I have to start today with an apology because we've had some technical difficulties and some issues with logistics over the last couple of weeks. This is because we are now at the new monastery, the Dharmabai monastery, and finding reception or any kind of internet connection is always a struggle from here. So there are times when the connection isn't that great, and even when we do find one, sometimes it's a bit intermittent. So please do bear with us if you do come across any technical challenges, technical issues, or even logistical ones. Sometimes we are unable to always start at the time that we promise, because by the time we get things set up and make a start, we only then realize that something else has, some other component has decided not to work. So despite all of that, we remain resolved, we remain determined to always conduct this program and at least make every effort that we can to make sure that you get to receive the Lord Buddha's message at least once a week, that you listen to it. So this is why today, since we had the issue once, we decided let's stream the program again so that you may be able to listen to this again. We will also make this recording available post the program through our social media channels. And as always, I invite you to post any questions you might have on the web radio chat window, and we can pick those questions up from there and try and answer them as we go along. Okay, so my sources tell me that the web radio is working fine, and that's good news, so let's make a start. When I try and sit down for a sermon, I try and sync with the needs and the requirements of our listeners, both those who are sat in front of me and also those who may be listening online. It's not always an easy task, but sometimes I'm successful, other times it doesn't quite always work out. But I think something I feel might be of value is to try and answer the question of the purpose of life, because it's a question that we as human beings have been trying to answer for a very long time, and I am also conscious that there are listeners who join us from many countries all over the world, and also listen to these programs offline, or rather leisurely once they have been recorded. And some of you who are not, to whom perhaps Buddhism is novel, you'll be familiar with the religion itself or the philosophy, but the teaching that we talk about may be new ground. And use these sessions to really tap into your experiences, practical Buddhism. I think this is the best way to perhaps try and describe what we talk about. But as always, the Buddhism that we talk about is always focused towards Nibbana, because it is our belief that the Lord Buddha's arrival into this universe, into this world, is to preach the message that is Nibbana. So to be spending a lifetime that we have been very fortunate to receive, a lifetime that we have worked really hard, humanity that we have worked really hard to gain on various other ventures and various other pursuits, may be sometime not put into best use. But ultimately that's an individual choice, and we respect that. But this is why oftentimes we our message here is always about Nibbana. You might ask a question which is not directly related to it, but somehow I can't help it that we'll try and find a way to link it back into Nibbana. So the question that I'd like to pose and for us to have a think about today is, what is the purpose of life? Think about how far you've come along in life, and we'll all be of various ages, various stages in our lives. Some may be in primary, some of you might be in secondary school, some in university, some perhaps in college, others might be in employment. There may be some of you who have retired. There'll be others who are family. Some of you may be single. Some looking to get married. Others with kids. Some settle down. Others still looking to buy a place. So we have the full range, and that is good, because that represents the type of listeners that we get. But what I want you to think about is, as we have lived our lives for as long as we have, and I'm talking about this life in particular, think about what is it that we have sought, what is it that we have pursued, what is it that we have tried to achieve in the pursuit of our lives. And I want you to think about that for a moment. When we speak to various people about this question, oftentimes people say it's to fulfill a duty, to fulfill a responsibility that I have towards my friends, my family, to my children. Others say it's to try and become a good citizen to society. Others say it's just the right thing to do. I want to work hard. I want to be virtuous. I want to be able to produce more than I do today, and I want to forever keep producing more than I do. Then there are others who are just content with what they do, and that's fine as well. But if we try and, I suppose, distill these messages down to a few simple realities, a few simple pursuits, I think the word happiness, the word pleasure, the word comfort, the word comfort keeps coming up time and time again. And therefore I think it's fair to say that no matter what we do it in the hope that our effort brings us some value, and that value can be expressed in terms of a level of happiness, a level of pleasure. And if you think about some of the examples of situations, circumstances in life that bring us this happiness, that bring us this pleasure, then, thinking about my own experiences, you work hard, you then spend the weekend with your friends, you might go out for a meal with your family. Where I used to live, people used to live for the week and then go out and go out for a drink with friends, and the weekend was all about partying hard. You work hard, you party hard, and nothing wrong with that. Then there are others for whom it's the simple things in life that makes them happy. It could be good food, drink, and for some people it's as simple as as long as I get my 8 hours of sleep, I'm happy. So it's different things for different people. But if we try and understand why is it that the things that we do, the things that we acquire, the things that we bring towards us make us happy, I think that's an interesting question. Because imagine if you ran a business. You open your doors for business on day one. So you're setting up a shop for the first time. You open your doors for business. You get 1 or 2 customers. At the end of the day, you count you do your books and you check how much money you've made. If you've made more money than you've had to spend, then that's a good day. Now, reality is it's going to take you a while before you get to that point, before you start turning the reds to black. But you give it a few months, maybe, sometimes half a year, maybe a year. If it's a business of a large scale, and then you've got to make a call. You've got to decide. Am I running this business for the right reasons? If I'm not making money, and if I'm not making enough money for the effort that I'm putting into it, for the hours that I'm putting into it, for all the time I'm spending away with my family, then what am I really getting out of this business? Am I really not making more of a loss than a gain? And then, you might decide to either continue with the business or actually decide, I'm in the wrong line of business, maybe I'll try something else. Or just decide, no, business isn't the game for me, I want to try and do something else. Isn't it interesting that we do that with, we do that when we run a business, but we don't look at life the same way. We don't necessarily take a stop, pause, and look at how have I been spending my life. You don't wait 20 years before you look back at your business and you check your books and to make sure that you're making more money than you're losing. You do it at the end of the day. At worst case scenario, you do it, at the end of the year when you do your annual tax returns. But no one waits 20 years to do that. Certainly not 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. But it just happens to be that with life we seem to take a more haphazard approach. We seem to take a less serious approach. We seem to be happy with just about anything. We seem to just live the day and not worry about what happens next. We seem to just take every day as it comes and really not check the books and make sure I'm heading the right direction. Am I getting what I want out of life? Now, if we are able to say, and if we do say that it's happiness that we are looking out of life, it's a level of comfort, it's pleasure that we are looking to get out of life, then is it not fair to say that then you shouldn't probably wait 30, 40 or 50 years before you pause and check, am I getting the right kind of happiness? Am I getting a happiness that is worthwhile? Am I getting, or is this happiness simply a fiction of my own memory, a fiction of my own mind? Or really is there more to it than that? Is there substance behind this happiness? We don't really stop to think about that. So why don't we take a pause today and consider what this happiness, what this pleasure that we seek is really about. The examples that we talked about before, going out with friends for a meal, or even just having a meal when you're feeling hungry, quite clearly that gives you a level of satisfaction, that gives you happiness. When when it's a hot day outside and you come back indoors and you get, someone treats you to a cold drink, you could give them the whole world, because you feel great. When it's a hot day again and someone turns on the cooler, the air conditioner, then that gives you a good feeling, and you feel really happy about it. You feel a sense of pleasure about that. But for those of you who live in countries that see more cold than heat, you might fancy standing in front of the heater when you just come back indoors, and that gives you an element of pleasure, an element of comfort. Have we not, though? Have we ever stopped to ask ourselves, this comfort, this pleasure that we seek, is it really comfort that exists in the things that we think that it exists in, or in the situations that we think that it exists in, or in the people that we think that bring us this happiness, or is it really a function of the way we express ourselves outwards? What do I mean by that? Let me put that in simple English. Food does give us pleasure, granted. But does it not only give us pleasure when we are hungry? A cold drink does give us pleasure. It gives us a level of comfort. But does it not only do that when it's a hot day outside and you've been outside? An air conditioner, the cool breeze that comes from an air conditioner, when you open your front door, your back door, and you allow that breeze to flow through your house, that's a good feeling. But it's only a good feeling when it's a hot day outside. When it's a cold day outside, you shut every door and window that you can, and turn the heating on full blast. And then you think, actually, that's what gives me comfort. So, without us knowing, what we seem to be doing is finding this comfort, finding this pleasure, when we appear to be relieving ourselves from an experience of discomfort, an experience of pain, an experience of suffering, an experience of either mental or physical stress and discomfort. Going back to the example of how food is satisfactory, how food can give us comfort, well, yes, but that's only when you're hungry. If you have a full tummy, you've just had a big full meal, food at that point can be quite revolting. In fact, the thought of it, and you might run a mile. Whereas if someone offers you food when you're hungry, or even the sound of cutlery banging into each other can be quite joyful, can be quite a pleasurable feeling, because of the promise of this relief from a discomfort that is on the way. The cold drink, as I said, is a good feeling when you've just come out from the heat outside. So, if that is the case, and actually let me give you another example. Having lived abroad for several years, and now in Sri Lanka, every year I used to travel to Sri Lanka for a short holiday. And something that I witnessed at the airport is people, when they meet each other, they hug, they say nice things about each other, they wish each other, and they go there, they go back to their homes. And interestingly, when people meet, a day or two later, or a week or two later, the nice things that are said, the gestures that I exchanged are not really at the same level as which when people meet each other after several years. That's entirely on another level. So, if meeting another person after a period of time gives someone a sense of pleasure, then if you drew the level of pleasure on one axis on a chart, and the length of time that you've been away from that person on the other axis, what you find is there is a relationship between the two. The more time you've spent away from that person, the more pleasure you get when you see them again. And therefore, if someone asked you, what about your partner who may be deployed in another country, perhaps in the military, and you only get to see them once a year, and seeing them once a year gives you gives you a pleasurable feeling. And if someone wanted to give you an even better feeling, all they would need to do is really to extend the time that the two of you are apart, which seems to be counterintuitive, which seems to be really a fallacy. This sense of pleasure, this sense of comfort and good feeling appears to me to be based on a philosophy that's fundamentally flawed, because we seem to be finding pleasure in relieving ourselves from pain, and to find that pleasure, what we seem to be doing is perhaps sometimes even deliberately subjecting ourselves to pain, to discomfort, and to such experiences that give us that level of tension. Let me give you a really good example. Well, I think it's a good example. I'll let you decide. What about thrill rides? We might have been on when you go to a theme park, and you go on the super fast rides that take you from 0 to 80 in less than a minute. I've been on a few of those rides myself in my time. Now, why does traveling on a thrill ride give you a pleasurable feeling? Have you ever considered that? Well, if you think about it, what a thrill ride does is you look at the ride and you think, there's no way I'm going to survive this. You get on the ride, you buckle yourself up, and they play all sorts of sounds that intensify the experience, that give you an element of stress, that gives you an element of fear, and an element of terror. And the whole world saying, this is the last time you're going to be alive. 2 minutes from now, that's going to be the end of you. And they put in you an element of fear and threat and scare. And now you're thinking, that's it, why did I even decide to sit on this? So this level of tension builds up inside of you, and quite frankly, you're suffering now inside, to an extent that you didn't imagine would be the case a few seconds before you sat down. Now the countdown starts, and that thrill keeps building up and up and up. You're on your way, and now it goes to the peak of the ride, and now you're thinking, that's it, that's the last time I'm going to speak to the person next to me. You look to the person next to you and say, why did you even think about getting on this ride? But at that moment when your fear is at its highest, what is the ride designed to do? To relieve you of that pain and of that discomfort. How? It brings you back down to ground level, and now you're feeling safe. Now you're feeling that level of pleasure, that level of threat, that tension, all disappear slowly but gradually. That slow and gradual relief from the pain, from the discomfort, from the stress is a good feeling. Isn't that why we get on a thrill ride? So, if you think about it, what have you actually done? You've gone to a theme park, you've asked the person that operates the ride, here's some of my hard-earned cash, can you please take my money, instill in me the fear of death, and then take that away from me. That makes me feel good. If you think about it like that, how ridiculous does that make you feel? I mean, I'm thinking about my own experiences and I feel like a donkey. Because I've done this. And today I reflect on that and I think, what was I thinking? Let's take a simple example, another example of, I've mentioned this before in the past. You watch a movie, an action movie. Think about how the story builds up. Why do we sometimes walk out of a theater and go, that was a great movie, and other times we go, what a waste of time that was? Let's think about what actually happens. You go into the cinema. The story is such that the director introduces some characters that you really like, because they possess and they portray qualities that you like to have within you. Some of them look pretty. You like to look like them. Some of them are muscular and strong, and you're wanting to be like them. You're never going to get there, but at least you're thinking, one day maybe, right? Some of them are clever, some of them are really smart, and you want to be like them. So immediately, because you want to be like them, you now respect them. You now like those characters. But what the director does next is the most interesting thing. They subject these characters that you really like to pain, to discomfort, they terrorize them. This is all part of the story. They're now under threat. They're now going to be killed. They're now going to be shot, murdered, crucified. But when it feels like that's the end of their story, there's no hope for them, here comes a superhero. And he saves them. Or somehow or the other, they escape from that intensifying situation that they're in. When the build-up was such that, there was a lot of tension, and you're thinking, oh my God, I do not want them to be under any stress. I don't want that pretty woman to be crying like that. Or how I wish I could go and save her. Because you now build that bond with them, and you're feeling you're part of that cinema and that action. You're now under a lot of stress, under a lot of pain, under a lot of tension. And what does the director do next? Relieves you of that pain. He relieves you of that pleasure. Oh, how kind of him. That relief from the pain, from the stress, from the anxiety is such a good feeling. Therefore, you find pleasure in watching a movie. So, again, what you might as well do is walk up to the director and say, here's some of my hard-earned cash, terrorize me, make me feel bad, make me feel like the scum of the earth, and then relieve me from that pain. Why? Because that gives me good feeling. How do you feel about yourselves? I'm relating my own experiences because I've been through this. I've done this time and time again. But it's only today I look back and think, what was I thinking? You might as well walk up to someone and say, here's some money, hit me with a stick, and then someone's going to come and pat me. Because that makes me feel good. This is why our Lord Buddha comes into this world and opens our eyes to this reality. He asks us to analyze the things that we've been doing all our lives. Again, think about how long you've been alive on this planet. It may be for 20 years, maybe for 30, 40, 50, and so on. You run a shop, you don't wait 20 years before you ask yourself, have I found the pleasure? Have I started making money? However, it seems to be okay that we wait until we are 50, 60 and so on before we stop to think, I've been looking for pleasure all my life, I've been looking for happiness all my life, but have I been looking for it the right way? Isn't all I've been doing subjecting myself to agony, subjecting myself to pain, to discomfort, and then finding temporary relief from that? Every time I've fed myself, has it not been a good feeling because I was hungry? Every time I've found a glass of water, a cool drink, or found comfort under an air conditioner, is it not because it was hot outside? Every time I felt, going to the dentist was a good feeling because he pulled my teeth out. Did I not, my tooth out that was decaying, did I not stop to think, well, it's because it was a decaying tooth and it was hurting me? That's why it was a good feeling when that happened. We don't realize these things, and what we do is we go after these experiences in life and subject ourselves artificially sometimes to pain and discomfort, just so we can then relieve ourselves from that and then experience that pleasurable feeling that we spend a lifetime looking for. When is that going to be enough? When are we going to find what we're looking for? Does that exist outside? Does it exist in the physical objects that we think is going to bring that to us? We go and get married, have kids, build relationships, get jobs, go and play sport, play games, go see friends, have a drink. All of these things we do because we think that gives us pleasure. But we don't realize that with each of these things, this pleasure comes in the relief from the pain that we have subjected ourselves to. Again, an example I've used in the past. We go on holiday. We do this all the time. We save up money, go on holiday. We go to countries like Singapore, to Malaysia, to Thailand, and so on. But the irony is, people in those countries leave those countries and go to other countries on holiday. So it seems to be okay that we think pleasure exists in those countries, but people in those countries go to other countries. So clearly there's a problem here, a problem that we've never stopped to think. We've just taken it to be okay, we've just taken it for granted that this is how my parents have lived, this is how my grandparents have lived, this is how generations before me have lived, and it's okay for me to do the same thing. The Lord Buddha in the Kalama Sutra says, you don't take things just because your parents say that it is the case, just because your elders say this is how something is, just because it says like that on a book, or just because your teacher says as such. You only accept something as true when you analyze it, you apply it to yourself and ask yourself, does this make sense with what I believe in? Does this apply to me? Why do we not do that with our own lives? Why do we waste our lives away, the 20, the 30, 40, 50 years, a whole lifetime, a humanity that we've worked so hard to gain? Becoming a human being is such a hard thing to do. The Buddha has given plenty of examples, plenty of metaphors to try and explain how difficult it is to become a human being. And yet, we seem to waste our lives by not really doing much and gaining much out of it. The real shame is, not only do we go about seeking pleasure in worldly things, in worldly pursuits, but some people also seem to think that committing sins, murdering someone to gain what they're after, or stealing it to gain what they're after, lying, thieving, all of these things are okay as long as they can get what they want. What they don't realize is, by doing these things to gain this satisfaction, this pleasure, which is so temporary, which is only a fiction of their mind, by committing those sins, what they're doing is they're paving the path for them into the apayas, into the hells. So actually you are now spending a lifetime trying to satisfy yourself by putting yourself into pain and then relieving yourself from it. And then to do that, sometimes, a lot of the time you don't make use of virtuous ways of doing it. You go above the law. Sometimes you do bad things. You do all of the bad karmas to try and attain these things. And there in itself you accumulate this bad karma that's going to take you for a lifetime into the apayas, eons and eons, many thousands of years, again, which is going to be full of suffering. And then even once you've acquired the things, for example, you might think, actually, I've been riding a bicycle for the last 10-15 years of my life, it's time I upgrade. I get myself a car, or I get myself a motorbike. Now, when you had a push bicycle, when you had a normal bicycle, you didn't have to worry too much about where you parked it. It was okay to leave it under in your shed overnight. But now, not so. You've got to keep it under lock and key. You've got to set an alarm on it. You've got to sometimes hire security to keep an eye on it. Why? Because these things, you've given it a lot of value. Why? Because you worked really hard to acquire this. No wonder you're going to give it a lot of value. But why don't we not realize that in bringing these things closer to me, what I've really done is bring with it a whole lot of pain, a whole lot of agony, a whole lot of terror, a whole lot of tension, along with all of these worldly, material things. We forget we do that, and we constantly keep acquiring more and more. And it's such a shame that, in worldly life, in material life, acquiring these material possessions appears to be and seems to be the the measure of someone's success. And then you're not only having to protect them from and keep them safe, but also an attribute of anything that has come together due to conditions is that as the conditions change, the effect changes. So it goes to decay and death. So whether it's a car, it's your wife, it's your children, it's your house, it's your job. Regardless, from the moment you acquire it, from the moment you've set your mind on it, what you've done is you've set your mind on trying to sustain something that is only going one way, and that is towards death and decay. Now that cannot be a good feeling. And when it happens, you now have to go and work even harder to try and sustain them, to try and maintain them, to try and find the parts to fix when things go wrong. When your wife is saying, you haven't treated me to a meal for 2 weekends, you've been working all your time. Well, in your mind you're thinking, good heavens, the reason I've been working so hard is to try and earn the money to find time to find the money to try and treat you. But she's asking for something else. Now you've brought her home, you're thinking you're going to find pleasure in that, but now you've got to maintain that, and what you think is right is not necessarily what she thinks is right. But this is the reality. No two people would think exactly the same way, and yet we expect people to be like that. And this is why the Lord Buddha says, think about what you're doing. Is this meaningful, what you're doing? When are you ever going to find this satisfaction, this contentment that you're looking for? Does it actually exist in the worldly possessions that you seem to work so hard to acquire? Or is this pleasure that you think exists outside simply a fiction of your own mind? Is it not something that you create for yourself and then go looking for it? Just like if I gave you a piece of paper and some color pencils and said, draw a picture that you like. Any picture. Whatever picture you like, your favorite picture, draw it for me. And I say, right, I come back in an hour's time and I collect it from you. Now, each of you might have a different picture. But let's say, for argument's sake, one of you might have drawn a sunset. You'll have the sun that you might have seen in Galle. You'll have the beach that you might have seen in Hikkadu. You'll see turtles that you've seen on Colombo Beach, in the beach in Colombo. And you might see the blue water that you've seen in Trincomalee. And you might also see perhaps some kids lying around, or some coconut trees that you might have seen perhaps in Barbados. All of these places that you've been to, or things that your friends or your family have told you about, such and such places. You've stored them in your mind in the form of upadana and namarupa. Right? You've kept them in your mind, and now when I ask you to draw a picture, you bring all of those really good parts that you like, and now you've created this mental picture, which you have now committed to paper. If you then asked me, can you go and find this place? Do you think I'm ever going to find that place? No. But isn't that what your mind makes you do on a daily basis? Your mind pulls all of these bits and pieces of food that you might have liked, or stories of foods that your friends have told you about, perhaps you've seen on TV, seen on an advert, or maybe perhaps even just smelled and thought, that must be this kind of food, or that must be that kind of food. You bring all of these things together, and your mind, this magician, your mind, this wizard, your mind creates this mental picture and says, go and find this. And your mind sends your physical body, your mind itself on a pursuit, trying to find this pleasure, trying to find this comfort, trying to find this satisfaction that is only a fiction of your mind. How and when are you ever going to find it? But you spend a lifetime in pursuit. You spend a lifetime after which you're tired, you're exhausted. By the time you're 60 or 70 or 80, this is why all people usually of that age then turn to religion. They go to the temple, they go to the mosque and they start thinking, good heavens, I have lived a lifetime and I'm still not happy. I'm still not content. I ought to start doing something that's going to make me happy now. The thing is, people who've been through that experience still speak to their, to the younger generations and say, you've got to do exactly what we've done. You've got to go learn, you've got to go educate yourself, you've got to go have kids, build houses, buy homes, settle down, do a good job, and make money. And that's going to give you happiness. Well, the irony is they've done exactly the same thing for many, many, many years, and they've not found the satisfaction that they've been looking for. And yet they think you're going to find it there. So, this is why when the Lord Buddha comes along, he says, open your eyes and look at this satisfaction that you think exists out there. Is it for real, or is it something that you've just created? And therefore, do you on a daily basis just cure yourself when you feel that agitation, when you feel that tension, when you feel that discomfort and pain? Do you just cure that pain on a daily basis? For example, do you always keep feeding yourself? Do you always spend your life and every lifetime you've come in this samsara feeding yourself when you're hungry, watering yourself when you're thirsty, sleeping when you're sleepy, finding shelter over your head when you're feeling cold, when you're feeling attacked by the elements? Do you keep doing that, or do you find the root cause for why you're needing them in the first place and cure that? That is the message of the Lord Buddha. The root cause for this is the fact that you're alive. You've been born as a human being. No different to animals. No different for the devas. No different for brahmas. No different for the beings in the apayas. They might not need clothing like you and I do. They might not need food the way that you and I take food. But all beings survive on food. That might be happiness for some. It might be good smells for some. It might be essence that is found in certain types of plants, in food for some. For you and I, it's solid food. But it's not the same for all beings. But regardless, all beings need some kind of food to survive. So do they go through samsara always finding food to cure that ailment which is hunger? Or do they cure hunger itself? To cure hunger itself, you've got to stop this rebirth cycle. Why? Because every time you're born, you can't stop the fact that you need to be fed, you need to be watered, you need to go to the toilet, you need to sleep, you need to reproduce and do all of those things. So, that is the essence of what I wanted to talk about today, and I hope it's opened your eyes to a way of thinking, really, because ultimately, as I always say, this is, listening to these sermons is only the place where you open your eyes to a way of thinking. But the practical needs to happen in the lab, and your life is your lab. Your daily life is your lab. Apply this into your everyday situations. Every time you feel something gives you pleasure, something gives you comfort, when you eat food, when you take a drink, when you go take a cold shower, when it's hot outside, ask yourself, why do I feel that this feels good? Is it not because I'm now relieving myself from pain and discomfort? And if so, how many times have I done this in the past? When is it enough? Is it ever going to be enough? If not so, how do I stop this once and for all? And if you decide, I need to stop this once and for all, then you ask yourself the question, how? The answer is what the Lord Buddha has given us. Attain Nibbana, where rebirth is stopped once and for all. When you're not born, you don't have to go finding answers to these problems that all of these beings that go through samsara in this rebirth cycle have to on a daily basis. So that's the essence of today's discussion. I hope it's been useful. I hope you find a way of thinking that you should be able to practice until the next time you speak, or at least until the next time we have this discussion. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them on Skype or on the web radio, and we'll pick them up and try and find answers to them in the next program. So may the merits that you have acquired in listening to this Deshana and also in conducting the Deshana help you support the Devas, the Brahmas, and all of the past relations, the past relatives that you invited at the start of this program. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all accumulated in the last hour or so. May the merits that we have all acquired help us in our journey to end this rebirth cycle, to end the pursuit of this fallacy that is the pleasure that we seek in our day-to-day lives. May it help us understand that it's only a fiction of our imagination, only a fiction, only a wizardry that our mind creates for us, and there really is no essence behind it. So let's stop that process once and for all. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in the Samma Sambuddha Gautama Shasana itself. Theruvan Sarnai.